Thank you. Right, everyone? Good evening. Welcome to the Harrison Township Planning Commission meeting. Today is April 18th. Thank you, April 17th, 2014. And that will tell you what kind of day I'm having. Okay, roll call, please. Mr. Tominello, would you like to act as secretary tonight?
Surely.
Roll call, please. Mr. Bloom is excused
Hang on
absence.
1 second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. The roll call, Mr. Batcha,
Here.
Mr. Falk,
Here.
Mr. Ogalati,
Here.
Mr. McDougal.
Here.
Ms. Murray,
Present?
and Mr. Tominello, present.
And Mr. Bloom is excused absent this evening. I would like to make a motion to table our election of officers until our next meeting. We will have a full board next time. I think it's important that all 7 of us be present for that. If you are all in favor of that, I don't even know if I need a motion to move that. I guess I should.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McDougal. Second,
Support.
Mr. Batcha, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All approved. Approval of the agenda as just recently updated.
So moved.
Supported.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of our minutes from our March 20th, 2014 meeting. Sizable listing.
I had just one thing to double check with Sabrina on page 10. It motion by myself, supported by member Bloom. But then on page 11, there's another supported by member Batcha.
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Is it 2 separate motions?
I thought we had
I don't think it is.
I thought we had an addition to the motion, as I recall.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Batch is the one who supported, and I think Mr. Bloom is incorrect there.
Yeah, and so it would change
Correct.
to member Batcha there, and then under the item number 11, motion supported by member Batcha there would just be removed.
Removed. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes from Thursday, March 20th, 2014, as we just discussed with the revision.
I have a motion to approve the minutes from March 20th. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Oggiati, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our first item is a public hearing for a special land use, but this applicant has requested to be tabled. This is the outdoor media item, case number 0314, special land use. They're going to be tabled until the 15th, 2014. So may I have a motion to table that case number, please?
Motion to table it as stated.
And a second, please?
Support.
Mr.
Matt?
Batcha?
Question on the motion, Madam Chair. You
Yes.
mentioned the 15th, is that May 15th?
It is May 15th?
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item, please, Mr. Tominello.
Next item is case 0514 SLU, Belmar Harbor, 41700 Conger Bay, Harrison Township, a 12-boat rack storage addition to building number 4.
Madam Chair, just as a matter of disclosure, my residence is within the legal notice area distance from Belmar Harbor.
Thank you, Mr. McDougal.
Thank you.
Well, we're familiar with this case. Would we like Mr. Foster to come up and be available to answer questions.
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
And the public meeting is still open, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Okay, nothing has changed. This is still an addition to the east side of building, the southeast corner of building number 4, southwest corner?
Southwest corner.
Thank you. Building number 4 for a 12 boat rack storage to be enclosed on 2 sides and a roof,
Actually, 3 sides in a roof. It'd be
Three-
open on the west side.
open on the west
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
Mhm. Okay. And there was quite a bit of discussion about changing the volume on the, it's not the high-low. but
Backup
the-
beeper?
Thank you, yes. And the last I saw on that, I believe you were gonna try and find out how you could possibly do that. Do you have any update for that?
Yes, I do. I went through Senator Brandenburg's office, and I figured that might be a good way of doing it rather than going to direct, because they didn't want to really get into a OSHA audit. But they did. They went through and they went through the LARA Department, Legislative Affairs, and they talked to my OSHA, who was able, I guess, at least in this instance, to speak for OSHA. And they said that any safety feature that comes with a piece of equipment from the manufacturer may not be disabled. However, they said that there is no decibel rating that it has to be. It just has to be safe for the environment that you're in. So they said that we could reduce the volume. What we have to do now is figure out how to reduce the volume, because the way I read it, we cannot even replace what they've got with something that wouldn't have as much volume. You've got to keep what they put in. So it'll either have to be a muffler type thing to put over it, or if we can figure out whether we can get a rheostat. But, that obviously is good news for, all 800 of my boaters and the people behind there, if we can at least tone that down. So we'll be working on that to see if we can, get that toned way down.
Do you have any other information that you want to share?
No, I guess the only thing, I guess I'm looking for any direction that I can get. I decided, the way it's worded, obviously, I don't think there's any way in the world that you can do this. So I've asked, number one, to find out what the notes were, why it was worded that way in particular. And secondly, I decided to hold off going to the ZBA unless or until, the Harrison Township attorney could, make opinion to them whether it is something that even could be, a variance could be issued. There's no use my wasting their time and my money, and, if they can't issue a variance the way it's worded. So those are, kind of where I'm at, right now. I guess the only other way would be to, take it to court. That's the only thing I would see that if we wanted to do this, those are really my 3 options. Well, I guess the other option, the third one actually, is if this board would, look at rewriting the ordinance itself. But that's the only 3 things I see could work the way it's worded.
Well, I can tell you, I'm not sure exactly when that piece of the ordinance was put in place the way that it was. I'm not sure why it was worded the way that it is.
1987, Sabrina told me, is when it
Way
went in.
before my time.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, way before most of us, except
Not
for
before
Mr.
me.
McDougal. But that being said, it is the rule, it is
Yep.
the ordinance, and that's what we need to follow. Mr. Marhar, did you want to expand on that at all?
I think, Madam Chair, at this point in time, whether we agree with the ordinance or we disagree, there was obviously some type of decision made during the preparation of the ordinance that it was important enough that, this particular type of storage where, quite frankly, you could probably have a few more boats than you could under a standard stack type of, or standard rack type of storage in one location, could take place, that there'd be more consideration probably because, you could have a much more significant amount of traffic with the high-low and so forth, so, yeah, you know, I think that there was some thought put behind the ordinance provision, and it's in there. If it's something we wanna consider for a change, we could certainly take a look at that. But at this point in time, we're really faced with a site plan decision or a special land use decision based on this specific provision, and, you know, I think we're limited to a choice of, you know, a denial or a tabling to allow further research on the issue, so it's really up to the commission at this point.
And so if we were to deny outright, Mr. Foster still has the option to go to the ZBA on his own. We could table to allow him time to go to the ZBA on his own, with or without a recommendation by the PC. Correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, the applicant always has he always has that avenue to pursue a ZBA variance, yes.
But I guess my question is, the way it's worded, is there even anything that there be a variance granted? It's pretty specific, what it says.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, you can always go to the ZBA, but I'm gonna back up a minute. As far as legal opinions go, the only time we give out legal opinions is when it's requested by a township board or the supervisor, department head with, you know, township board approval, so we don't just give out legal opinions. And what our opinion on what that wording means is irrelevant. It's what this planning commission says it is, and then ultimately the ZBA. But as far as processes, the petitioner, if denied tonight, would, if he has any intentions of going to circuit court, you do have to go to ZBA to exhaust
Oh, I
your
see.
administrative
Okay.
remedies in the first
Okay.
place, so.
Okay,
And you can go to the ZBA for a variance and or an interpretation on what that ordinance means.
okay.
Thank you.
You know, and Madam Chair, quite frankly, and nothing negative towards Mr. Foster. He's, in my opinion, a stand-up businessman in the community. But, you know, with regard to the general ordinance itself, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of discrepancy in terminology there. The ordinance is pretty clear, you know, with regard to being enclosed and being enclosed with regard to access. I don't remember
Activity.
the terminology, but you know, I think that's pretty clear. So, you know, if we want to look at that and we want to talk about changing that, that's one thing. And obviously ZBA can look at that as well and say, Mr. Maher, you're crazy, and that's fine. But he can also ask for a variance, you know, from the provision of that, so, and that's totally up to Mr. Foster as he proceeds.
So as it's worded today, stacking and outboat storage may be permitted in a waterfront district. Specific requirements and conditions, all stack storage and in and out boat storage, including all storage racks and access to said racks, shall be enclosed in a building. No such stack storage or access to such racks can be maintained on the grounds of the premises outside a building. That's the ordinance. The public hearing is still open, so if we want to allow anybody else to come up and ask questions or comments, you're welcome to do so. Hi, Mr. Bardell. How are you?
How you doing? William Bardell. What I'd like to know is, this marina's been open 50 years. I'd like to know how on God's green earth you survived without these 12 extra boat racks. That's the first thing I'd like to know. And I'm looking back on my paperwork here. Didn't you just get approved for 1,800 square foot building number 12 and a pavilion and storage area at the north end of building number 8? Yeah, there's a reason why we have ordinances. We don't want blight. That's why we have ordinances. And, you know, let's look at the community and the taxpayers, you know, and the residents of the township. And, like I said, I don't know how you survived without these 12 boat racks before for 50 years. So, you know, I hope you can still stay in business without these 12 boat racks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bardell. Anyone else? Yes, please come up.
Yeah, my name's Rich Sadek. I live at 41540 Glockamora. I live within about 500 feet of your building there. And I guess I have some concerns with even the existing building, especially you wanting to add more to it.
Could you stand at the podium and address the,
Oh, okay, well, I kind of feel like I'm
Thanks.
talking to him. There's some things I looked at, and I just looked at, again, a very good point our neighbor brought up on the blight, the view, the appearance of the neighborhood, whatever else. It looks like we're in an industrial zone. It looks like we're in a little mini warehouse area. That is truly a warehouse by the definition of a warehouse. And quite honestly, I live within 500 feet of a warehouse at this point in time. The activities that occur there, I understand why they occur and such, but I live in a residential neighborhood. I didn't want to live in a warehouse district. I pay a premium to live there, which means I pay a premium in taxes. I don't feel that's something I should have to deal with, and now we want to expand upon that. There's a marina right next door. I know that they're not filled to capacity. I'm not sure, I can't comment on Belmar's situation, but last year there were many empty slips. Why can't the boats be in the water like everyone else's boat and stored in the water? Quite honestly, the reason I bring these different things up is I know there's a building already there in place, but nothing I have seen shows me or tells me that any kind of impact was assessed prior to this or any kind of risk was assessed prior to putting this in place. Right now, I did just a little bit of research on this, and right now let me ask you, what kind of fire suppression capability do you have?
if you could address the
address
board,
the board.
please? We'll
Well,
take the
I'm-
questions and
Okay.
he's paying attention, believe me.
Okay. What kind of controls are in place? When I look at risk and impact in this fashion. First of all, you have to assess, you have to determine the gaps, then you look at controls to mitigate or to remediate. I'm pretty good with risk-based things. And what I look at is, I look at a large building above ground containing thousands of gallons of fuel, oil, flammable materials, many of them which, when burned, do represent a danger to those people who might inhale that. And I don't see any consideration for safety. I don't see any consideration for the neighborhood when it comes to the other aspects of that. Again, noise, some of the other things. It was nice to mention that they could bring the noise level down of the high-low, but that's really a minor part of it. It is. The additional smell from the high-low fumes and stuff, well, we got smelly boats in the neighborhood too, so you could discount that. But really it is the appearance and the additional risk that's being introduced, and I don't see anyone addressing that. And quite honestly, without an assessment and without understanding the controls and without understanding what would be done in the case of an issue like this, like again, a fire inside that boat, in that boathouse would be catastrophic. I'm 500 feet away from 5,000 gallons of fuel, okay, sitting above ground. Gas stations have fire suppression, everything else. What is being done in this case to protect me? I don't think, and I did a quick look today, and I really should get out and measure, I don't think there's a fire hydrant closer to me than that building is. I'm sorry, that represents a danger, and I don't believe it's an acceptable risk unless you folks can show me that you've done the due diligence otherwise to say that it is. So adding to an existing problem already that I see, I vehemently am opposed to. And I believe, quite honestly, that there's a lot of empty slips out there. I understand the convenience for these 9 to 12 boaters to have their boats, stored and pulled into the water as they need it. But quite honestly, there's a whole lot of boaters in the community that keep their boat in the water. There's a whole lot of empty boat slips here in our area. I am sure these folks can be accommodated by keeping their boat at some place, including Belmar, in an empty slip that may currently exist. So, again, vehemently opposed, and realistically, I'd like to know if anyone has ever assessed the risk to what is there now, because honestly, I want to make sure I'm safe, I'm covered. Is there anybody that's actually transferred the risk in the way of insurance or any other methodology to cover me for the damages that might be caused if something were to happen? One last point I'll add, something that was brought up in the meeting notes that I got a hold of for the last meeting. It was stated in there that the folks there are pretty safe, and I'll have to say overall, yes. I just happened to be outside, though, the morning that they missed with a boat bringing it into the door, the south-facing door, and clipped the top of the door frame. It took a while to sort it out, and it was painted a different color for a while and stuff, but accidents do happen. And realistically, no matter how safe you are, how skilled your people, how conscious you are of those things, you can't take that out of the risk equation. Accidents will happen. And I'm looking at the board right now and saying, you are the folks responsible, you folks included, to make sure we're safe. How have you addressed this How will you address this if you allow this person to proceed and add more fuel storage above the ground?
Thank you, Mr. Savick.
Thank you.
Jim Sunstock, 31698 San Juan. I'm here not to add so much to it, but to add the fact that we still have several snowbirds down south, a couple from Belvedere, a couple from Venice Shores, et cetera. So, you know, somebody always makes the case that, well, they didn't take the time to show up, so they didn't care. Well, they do care. They get Loudmouth Jim to come out and say something in the process until they get back. It was indicated in a letter that was circulated to the PC that I don't represent Venice Shores and all of the residents of Venice Shores. This is a resident of Venice Shores right here, the person that just talked. But I live in Venice Shores. I'm a member of a board of 24 members on our board, not 5, 24. That represents almost 10% of the 271 properties in this association. The board took the position that they do not want to see this happen. All they did is elect Sunstock or tell Sunstock as president to go up and voice it for us. So we do represent the residents. Yes, there's going to be individual people that are for it, and that's their right. But to say that I don't represent all of the residents, nobody represents all of the residents. The president doesn't represent all of the citizens of the United States. I was elected to be the president. I was directed by a board that was elected by the people to come here and express the opinions and things that I said. So I just wanted to clarify that. Additionally, I'd like to say that, you know, while it's nice to talk about reducing the noise, there is no specific plan yet to reduce the noise. And yeah, you can come in and talk about it. Yeah, that's a great idea. But the fact of the problem and the fact of the matter is, and it becomes a problem, is that once you get your approval, and that's what Mr. Howard would like to see you do tonight, once you get your, or Mr. Foster, I'm sorry. I associated Mark Howard with Belmar Harbor for many, many years. You were always the silent partner. So, but you know, once you get the approval, then there's no push to resolve the problem. I mean, this is a problem that's going on with the current operations, and you know, just because you don't get your rack storage or your 12 additional units doesn't mean you still can't address a problem for a future time frame to alleviate some of the concerns that the people have. Somebody suggested, and I'll suggest it again, that while they may not allow you to change the actual device that's operating, they may allow you to put some kind of a radar system very similar to almost every car in the that's coming out recently in the United States that detects if there's somebody behind you before it sounds the alarm. And all that would be is simply wiring it in between the reverse gear and the alarm. From what I read here, there's no problem doing that. So, I mean, there could be some kind of plan put together to address this, and I would ask that Mr. Foster please consider addressing this towards going forward, so that when the issue does come up again, and I'm sure he's probably going to want to try doing something with his rack storage, whether the law changes or something, or a variance or whatever, that there'll be less people concerned about it. As far as the fire, I would suggest somebody on this board actually talk to the fire department and find out what their plan is when there is a marina fire in Harrison Township. You may be very, very upset with the answer you get. So, with that, I'd like to basically reiterate the opposition to this project. If you were gonna come in, you have to address the eight items too, and there was no additional addressing of those items after we raised several concerns. So, I would urge this board to deny this application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sunstein. Anyone else? Okay, well, we have an option to close the public hearing and put our questions to Mr. Foster, if we have any, and then take a vote. Mr. Foster, did you want to address any of the questions while the public hearing is still open?
Well, again, we have followed through to find out what they say we can do right now, and that is solely to limit the volume. So we will do that regardless of whether we get the 12 or not, because I've got 800 boaters there too. So anything we can do on that helps my operations. As far as, what goes on at their, it's zoned waterfront. That's what marinas do. They move boats and they store boats. By making rack storage a special land use, you're basically limiting, Bellmare from competing with the other marinas around that quite commonly have rack storage out there. And it just seems to be a different type of person. They want their boat out of the water, just talking to Mike Ragusa today at the Harrison Township Business Meeting, and he's got all kind of people too that want rack storage. It's just something that there is I don't know if we could say a need, but at least there's a want for additional rack storage in our area. So that's basically what we're trying to do.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Foster? Or do we want to close the public hearing?
He can speak after we close
Yes.
the public hearing
Yes, he can.
to us. Yeah, I have several questions.
Okay, may I have a motion to, does anyone else want to speak? Okay, may I have a motion to close the public hearing for case number 05-14 SLU?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Support.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall.
Discussion?
Yes, discussion?
I think, any discussion on the motion?
Discussion on the motion?
Motion.
None? Okay. Roll call, please, Mr. Tominello?
Sure. Mr. Tominello, yes. Mr. McDougall? Mr. Valadi?
Yes.
Mr. Batchor?
Nope.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Murray?
Yes. Okay, public hearing is closed. Discussion. Questions for the applicant? Discussion among us?
Now
Mr.
I can have
Batchor?
my discussion that's outside of the motion then?
Yes.
I do want to remind everybody that at our March 20th meeting, I'm reading on page 5 of our minutes, motion by member Folk to leave the public hearing for case number 05-14-SLU open until the April 17th, 2014 meeting, to allow the applicant the opportunity to amend the plan to be consistent with section 13.38 or seek variances as necessary. Motion carried. So, to my point of not supporting the closing, I still feel, as I sit here today, that that still is a legitimate request. And as I sit here today, I don't see any movement by the applicant in order to accommodate that motion.
That is true. We have not received any changes to try and fit the ordinance the way that it is, nor has the applicant gone to the zoning board of appeals. Any other comments?
Just in reference to Mr. Batch's comment, I think it's clear, I believe to most of us, that there are at least 3 or 4 standards that this application simply doesn't even come close to complying with. I've got a whole string of items that are contained in the ordinance. I started by looking at the section 1338, I believe it is, which is the special land use, and then I went back and looked at, 1302, special land use, and then 1338, which is the rack storage section. And I started looking at the sections that you get directed to when you read those sections of the ordinance, specifically section 5 and section 6. And then I looked at the general waterfront, general waterfront, general waterfront marina ordinance requirements. And amongst numerous things, it appears to me that this kind of an application for an addition to an existing building reopens the entire engineering for the building itself, because this is going to be part of an existing building. So it reopens that entire engineering in terms of things like fire suppression, which the resident was talking about, and that he would have to comply with current codes for the entire building. Again, that's something that somebody a higher pay grade than mine is going to have to make that determination if this goes through. I also see a tremendous number of safety issues, and I realized when I started looking at it that the drawing that he had didn't show a real important item, and I'll pass this down to members of the commission, and if Mr. Foster would like to take a look at it, you're welcome to it, because I did a very, very, and if you, would you pass one of these over to the board over there for me, please? I looked at the overall plan of where it's going to be, and I realized there is no drawing anywhere showing us where this addition is going to be in relation to the rest of the marina. It shows it in the drawing right up against the existing rack storage building, but it doesn't show how it relates to things like the driveway there. And I took the liberty, being an old abstractor examiner and doing plans and drawings, I just simply extended the west line of the westerly. If you look right in the circle on this drawing, members, I took the liberty of extending the west line of that southerly, and I took the liberty of guessing where 5 feet out from the southerly edge of the existing building would be, and drew a line that ran westerly, parallel to that front of the building. And amongst other things, I think that that addition is going to actually encroach into what Mr. Foster's plans show as being his driveway, which in effect is his road. And he has 2 roads there involved here. Atlantis, which is like a thoroughfare road in our community. It services several hundred boaters driving back and forth on a daily basis in there, whenever they're in there. 2/3 at least of his marina drives by there. And the people up on Griffin are coming down, and where that addition, is going to sit, basically creates a complete block of view for people driving cars, etc. And I had a question for Mr. Foster. How many golf carts do you have in the marina? Do you register them?
Yeah, I think it's about 350.
Okay, that was even a little higher than what I thought. So we're dealing with, in addition to 800 cars roughly, 350 golf carts. Who drives those golf carts in the marina? Is that restricted to licensed drivers, or is
Yeah,
that?
it is.
It's restricted
Yeah.
to licensed drivers?
Yeah.
You don't ever have the children, the youngers driving?
We've had to stop them and go back to their parents, but yeah, it's definitely in our rules, and
Is it a regular enforcement issue for you?
it's been they've gotten better, to tell you the truth. At the beginning it was a thing, but we've kind of clamped down on it. It's been
Okay.
pretty good the last couple of years.
That's good to hear. But
Yep.
you've got the golf carts, you've got kids on riding bicycles, you've got pedestrians, and that's a totally blind corner. Now, the basic concept of setbacks on corners is stronger than any other setback rules that we have in our ordinance. Well, we've got a corner here that's going to have basically 0 setback, 0 visibility for traffic coming in 2 different directions. So I find that to be an atrocious design. And that just drives that right into the whole concept of the standard involving safety of the public, et cetera, as being a problem. Let's see. What else did I have? Oh, I wanted to ask another question, because it did disturb me when I looked at the plan. I was looking at the part of the plan that shows the new cement that is gonna be put in, proposed concrete pad, it's called on our drawing, and where the Wiggins forklift is gonna come around and it's gonna turn and it's gonna push the boats onto the rack and then it's gonna back up. And again, my observation, I think the view for the driver off the Wiggins forklift going forward, particularly with a boat on it, is at best very poor of what's in front of him. And I think the view to the rear is, I'll call it at least somewhat limited. He's got this pad here, and behind it, you'll notice where it says concrete, that's a dumpster enclosure. So if the forklift backs up right to the dumpster enclosure, and he's proposing to have the pedestrians who park, he has several parking areas designated, in Building 5, in Building 6, I believe, and along the south side of Building 5, Building 6, am I correct?
And inside 7, yeah.
Inside 7, one more building down. And where do these people walk when they go from those areas to the area to get in their boats in back of the building? They're walking right where that forklift is backing up. And if the concrete pad is that big, I gotta believe that it needs all of that concrete pad to operate, which means you've got kids, I'm particularly concerned about small children, walking in that kind of a situation, where this thing is gonna be backing up right against them. I think that's a danger there. I even have a concern, people park in Building 5, they, today, I assume, and I think I've observed, walk out of that overhead door that you put boats into Building 5 through. They walk out of that door and walk over to the back of the rack storage building to get in their boats after they park inside Building 5, is that correct?
Yeah, they would be
Okay.
to the north of where where that would be plucking out boats. So they'd be walking to the front of the building, which would be the north side, because that's where we launch all of them.
They're walking to the north.
Yeah.
And this would be on the south side that we're taking the boats out.
Can,
and
can,
backing up.
can you
Yeah.
come up to the
Sure.
podium
I'm
so
sorry.
that this
I'm
can
sorry,
get
yeah.
recorded? I'm looking at it and I'm seeing the north edge of that concrete going, if I extend that, look at that going back toward the building, I see the door coming out right where the word match is. That's where it is. You've got 3 parking places to the north of the door. So I think it's coming out right about where that word match is. Again, you've got children who are not necessarily well controlled, we all know that, and adults and everybody else coming out of that building walking, and they're tangling directly with a forklift. And I would ask a question. I saw in your rules that are posted online for the harbor, it says, and I will quote, give me just a moment to find it. It's the 7th item on the rules. It says, no boater is allowed inside the building for their own safety. Customers are to stay behind the yellow lines on the pavement. All work performed on or showing must be performed on the outside racks. That's not really relevant. My point is, the rules of the marina recognize the safety issue, I think, of the operation of this forklift by establishing yellow lines beyond which people can't go. You can't bring people across this area walking and have a yellow line to separate them because it's totally blocked, where the forklift is going to be operating and where the dumpster is. There's a lot of things like this I see wrong. I can go on and on because I got a list that I could probably spend an hour and a half on here.
Yeah, but we've been doing for, almost 30 years now, we've been doing the same thing on the east side of the building where we take boats over there. We've been doing it for 30 years over at the other side.
The difference is you don't have people parking over there. They're bringing their little children from their cars to go in to the back of the building to get on their boats. They're coming from Building 5,
But
Building 6.
they don't go
Building
to the back of the building, it'd be going to the front of the building, which is to the north.
7. Oh, you and I have a difference in what we call
Okay,
front and back.
okay.
You call the north side front, I call it the back side.
Okay.
Okay? The north side, I'll correct that, they're going to the north side.
And this
Yes.
machine is
They're coming
backing out
from the
on-
south side of everything and going right across that area where your machine is gonna be operating to put the boats in these proposed racks.
And I'm saying no, that they're going to be north of the area where the machine is pulling. If they come out of that building, they're already north of where the machine's backing up, and they're heading a little further north to get in front of the building.
Where do the people who park their cars alongside the south side of building 5, 6, and 7 walk?
Well, again, the building 5 is set up for just the rack storage people.
Yeah.
The other building on there is primarily for A-row. Those are guest spots for that. They're gonna be walking to the south to their boat wells. When we restrict the inside of building 5 to only the rack building customers. And so that's where they're to park first, and generally it doesn't get filled with that usage.
Okay, all I'm doing is reading your rules. Parking is allowed along the inside of buildings 5, 6, and 7, and along the south sides of buildings 5 and 6. That's your rules. I'm just looking at them saying, I don't like the idea of somebody parking in an area you're telling them to park in, walking across this area.
There's also a rule in there, I guess I'd have to look at it, but it says that building 5 is only for the rack storage people.
Understood?
Yeah.
Understood.
And they know that, yep.
How many line spaces do you have inside that
28.
building? 28? And 108 boats plus 12,
And it's
120.
really 104 plus jet skis are in 4 of the racks.
Yeah, you got,
And like I said, that on the
Bunch of
4th of July weekend, the busiest weekend, the most we have is 25% that have ever been out at one time.
yeah. Again, it's going all day long, though. 25 boats out in the morning, 25 other boats out in the
yeah.
afternoon,
Well,
25
that-
other boats out in the evening.
Yep, yep.
There's a lot more launches than 25.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
in a
no,
day.
I've said it one time, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
mislead it, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay. As I said, there are a number of other places where this application just, in my mind, doesn't dovetail with our ordinance. But I'd yield the floor with a note that I'd be more than prepared to make a motion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments for the applicant? A motion, please.
I'd be happy to make a motion, Madam Chair.
I do have a question for the applicant. Is the applicant, I want to get into the motion, but I want to leave some of the options that exist, to my point of my concern, which was, there's, in my opinion, there's 3 options that exist. Motion to approve, motion to deny, and all we did so far is just close public hearing.
Correct.
So there still could be another motion to table. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
So, to my question now to the applicant, hearing those options, the applicant is certainly, is not gonna make a request for a tabling. The
Well-
applicant is looking for this board to
You
narrow
know,
down.
the way
to
it's written, there's no way I could comply. I mean, I could put a door on that, but that still does not get away. It says, and access to those racks has to be enclosed. So as Doug, pointed out, again, it is going across the roadway. I can't enclose that roadway. So, right now, the way it's written, I cannot change it to possibly agree. And that's kind of what I was wondering at here, if the next step is to go to ZBA, but I was a little hesitant to spend the time and the money if, again, they can't issue a variance the way it's worded. So that's kind of what I was looking for, is a little bit of,
Well,
what do
well,
I
then
do?
Let's just discuss that to some
Yeah,
extent,
yeah,
because
yeah.
and maybe Pat or Rosemary can address that about the ZBA not granting a variance to the wording. That is the intent of the ZBA, to take an ordinance and based upon a hardship that could be proven to grant a variance based upon their opinion. So, to your statement, I would tend to disagree that they can't. Now, I'm not suggesting they will, but that's that's what their purpose is to take the ordinance and evaluate the ordinance and see for that specific case, is there a hardship that exists that would deem it appropriate to grant the variance?
I mean, the ZBA does have two options. They can look at an interpretation, number one, and, you know, in this particular case, I think reading it, well, I'm not gonna define what the ZBA ought to do. There's certainly room for them to give an interpretation of the ordinance. Number two, they may give a variance to the literal terms of the ordinance, which, you know, they can then say there's practical difficulty, not a hardship, because there's two different terminologies there.
Fair point, yes.
But practical difficulty that exists, and yes, they feel there can be a variance issue to allow for a variance to this requirement.
And I guess then I don't know, you know, even if it's closed tonight, I guess what advantages are to keep it open? If I go to ZBA, either they're gonna grant it or not. I guess I'm not sure, I'm a novice at this part of it. You know, is there an advantage to asking for it to be tabled? I guess I don't see it, you know, right now.
So, Mr. Foster, just for some information, so if in fact you go to the ZBA, and if in fact you get approval, you still have to come back here.
Okay,
With the ZBA approval.
I see.
And then we would grant your plan, or
I-
we would approve your plan as written.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
Maybe just a slight clarification. Mr. Foster would go to the ZBA to grant the variance for section 13.38. That's a singular issue.
Right.
That needs, which is for the ZBA to address the singular issue to that. That would be the limits of their evaluation. That would then satisfy the ordinance, so when it comes back to us, now we're dealing with a plan that satisfies the ordinance by definition, then it's still now up to us to determine, does that satisfy the 8 criteria?
Yes,
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
fair, that is correct.
that's correct.
Just a question for the applicant. Is there, not to get off the subject, is there any area besides building number 4 that there might be some sort of a compromise that you could put additional rack storage in, or is that a closed question? Is that?
Well, it really isn't practical. Besides that, Mr. McDougal always asks me, make sure when I have a building that we're not putting rack storage in there. But the practicality is that we could probably, with the same machine and same people, handle twice as many boats, just because of how they come out. If you put it in another building, then you're looking at another machine, another group of people, and it just physically doesn't work. That's really the problem with that. So this was a chance to, get 12 more at the same location that would make it workable. To spend the money and get enough payback to make it workable. But we couldn't do that in another location on the marina.
I just want to make sure, since we were
Yeah.
discussing this, that all options were exhausted before we closed.
Right.
Continuing that point for just a minute, it seems to me, and I worked in marinas as a young man, and I've been around a lot of the activities that occur, and square footage is square footage for winter storage, and your new building out there that was approved a couple of months ago is certainly a nice, lovely facility for winter storage. But it would seem to me that if you took and used that building, for example, as a rack storage facility and put modified your docks a little bit on the main cut there or on the inside within the marina, you could then simply use the existing rack storage building, move all your rack storage out there, use the existing rack storage for winter storage in terms of square footage. You've got it licked, and you've got the ability to run a lot of rack storage. Now, the technical practicalities,
Yeah.
the engineering of it, I'm not getting
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think there are alternatives available. I also think that there's room out on the north edge, and I've forgotten the name of the street, but I'll grab it just so that we have an accurate statement.
Windjammer's on the end.
Nautilus Drive. There's room on your property on the north edge of Nautilus Drive to erect a rack storage building there, and you could put the boats in right inside the marina there at the corner by where that lovely rised, what do you call it, with the, where you do the weddings out.
Gazebo, yeah, Mount Howard as we call it.
Yeah, Mount Howard, yeah, okay. But that area there, you could put another building up there that could accommodate 200 rack storage boats and do it, and that would do it. And you could have, it would be in one location, you wouldn't be splitting your resources with the forklifts, which you do have 2 of. And I understand it's a manpower issue, but that's another alternative for how to cure the problem of getting additional rack storage.
Yeah, it would be, but again, then you're talking major dollars that I don't have, you know, putting up a whole new building. I mean, I just don't have it. I got, you know, refinance to do what we're doing next. And to trade dollars, you know, just to give you an idea, with, say, take one of the existing buildings or the building we're putting up and trade dollars, it just doesn't work because the bigger boats are the ones that really want to be in the heated storage, and just the dollars don't work out, you
Well-
know, so that would be the problem.
But again, and just,
Yeah.
I believe I would like both council and planner and anybody else to comment on this one, but dollars don't amount to either hardship or practical difficulty at the
No, that's
ZBA.
correct. There can't be a financial,
Yeah. If it's possible to do, and
Yeah.
we've pointed out the possibilities.
Yep.
The other thing, and I thought about it, and I think this is, frankly, I'm not real sure I even want to say this, but I think the other thing to do, and you can expand the existing rack storage building and have all inside storage. All you have to do is remove a few wells on each side, buy a few of them back maybe from customers, but just move your land out another 50, 75, 100 feet, however you want to go, and add the building to the north from where it sits right now, and you'd have all kinds of room to put racks. That would be inside the building by just simply enclosing.
Yeah, it's, that would get real sticky, because like I say, you got the condo areas there, and as you put it out, the one dock sticks out 80 feet, because you kind of got them lined up coming and going.
gotcha.
And then you're really, you know, it just everything complicates it, so.
But
I know what
that's
you're
an
saying.
option-
I
That's a
know what
good
you're saying.
option that you closed off by
Yeah.
your own actions.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion or a motion, please?
Well, I thought I had a question out to the
Yeah,
applicant.
I think you did.
Okay.
If the applicant did want us to consider the potential of tabling.
When would the next CBA be?
Second Tuesday, I'm sorry, Wednesday, May 8th, but I'm not sure.
Let's see, that
It's the
was,
second Tuesday in May.
well, that's 16th, I don't think we were gonna get that one ready by then, because we've already passed the deadline for that one.
May 13th, excuse me. The deadline,
It was the 8th.
I'm trying to think of when I need to get it for paper. 13th. If I could get it
You can't meet the standards.
by Monday or Tuesday, I can still get it on paper.
Practical.
Yeah, I'm not sure we could get it all together that quick now.
And then June's meeting is June 10th.
So I guess if we were going to table it, I would say it'd have to be after the June ZBA, because I think that's the first one I can make now, to be able to do that.
You know, I got just interject something here, and I just mentioned Mr. Tominello, I think, he encouraged me to make this comment. And I'm not laying it off on Larry by any stretch of the
No, I mean,
imagination.
but it's true.
But I think this is something true that you really need to think about. My opinion, and I think some of the things I presented here tonight, the existing plan is deeply flawed under the 8 standards.
Okay.
And I think even if you got accommodation on the ordinance from the ZBA, as I said, I think this whole thing, the way this corner sets up with this building and blocking view and stuff, and we have a responsibility clearly under the 8 standards to look out for the safety of the public. And I don't think you're gonna come close to getting through the 8 standards after you go through the ZBA process. It's an exercise, you wanna pursue it, I certainly encourage you to do it if you wanna do it, but I'd feel bad if you came back in here and all of a sudden said, well, you didn't warn me about this, so consider yourself warned, I guess.
And the only real difference would be if it's tabled, they don't pay again to come back, really, that's
come
it,
back here.
yeah. And, so, I guess I'm willing to do that, and then if I, decide later that they're not coming back, I just let you know, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you do not want to go to the ZBA after you talk
Yeah.
to your engineer, and
Right.
you have the right not to go, and
Okay.
then you would just have to notify us that,
Okay,
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
to withdraw your
I-
application.
okay, I'd like to go
Administrative
that
detail
route,
at
and then
that
it gives me some time to, get with an engineer and try to look at some of the things that Mr. McDougal brought up and, go from that route.
Then that being said, I'll move to table the matter until, for no longer than the July meeting
Okay.
this year. You have a question in the audience, Madam Chair? Pardon?
We have to
July
have a second.
17th, to be specific.
If you have a second before.
Okay, hang on. So we have a motion to table case number 05-14 SLU until July 17th. May I have a second, please?
Support.
Mr. Batchor?
Addendum on that, July 17th or sooner at the option of
No
that.
later than.
No
Okay,
later than,
no later
no
than.
later than. I'll stick with no later than.
Okay, table no later than July 17th. Motion by Mr. McDougal, supported by Mr. Batchor. Roll call, please, Mr. Tominello?
You want to take?
I'm sorry, discussion on the motion. Please.
Basically, you're tabling this to allow him to go to the ZBA. And he's gonna have to file a ZBA application to go to the ZBA. If you look at the jurisdiction of the ZBA in your own ordinance, basically, it says, permit modification to setback, location, site, or building requirements, which this is, when sponsored by the Planning Commission for a specific proposal that benefits the township by providing better design, and we've heard that it's not a very good design, or efficient use of the site, or results in a more creative development. That's the only thing that the ZBA can consider. So if he's not going to do that, and you're not gonna make the recommendation tonight, he can't go to the ZBA.
What section are you looking at, Mr.
I'm looking at
Sensdorf?
section 1501 jurisdiction for the ZBA.
Thank you.
And it's item number E. So I would recommend, or at least ask, that this board basically deny it. If Mr. Foster has some specific ideas, I like the idea of putting it out farther out in a bigger building farther out. Whatever he wants to do, but all this is doing right now is creating an expectation that maybe this might be approved. And as Mr. McDougal said, you haven't even addressed the 8 criteria yet. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sensdorf.
Madam Chairman, I disagree. Section 15012 says to grant variances from the provisions of this ordinance as may be in harmony with its general purposes and intent. It does list other A through H as examples, but if he wants an interpretation of what an enclosed means, he can get that from the ZBA, or to grant a dimensional variance from the letter of the ordinance, which would be an enclosed building.
Thank you.
And I guess at that point, the motion didn't say anything about going to ZBA, it was just a motion to table.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so, any more discussion on the motion? I have a motion to table until no later than July 17th by Mr. McDougal, supported by Mr. Batchor. Roll call, please, Mr. Tominello.
Mr. McDougal?
Yes.
Mr. Batchor?
Yes.
Mr. Ogalati?
Yes.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello, yes. Ms. Murray?
Yes. Motion carries. You are tabled, sir. Okay, any unfinished business? No? Any new business? Correspondence? Comments from the planner?
Madam Chair, I have no comments tonight, thank you very much.
Feel better. Comments from the floor?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes,
Do I
Mr.
need to come here, or do I?
No, Mr. Sadik, please come up.
I heard a lot of interesting discussions. I heard Mr. McDougal bring up a couple other recommendations, but nobody addressed the risk yet. And I think to even consider any other discussion on this topic without a risk assessment, an impact assessment of some sort, I think is negligent. I don't think there's due diligence on the part of this board or the township officials if that were to be done. So my concern is, again, as Mr. McDougal stated, for the safety of the people here in this township. That would include my neighbors and, of course, my family. And quite honestly, I don't think there should be any other discussions on this matter without these conditions being met. And Mr. Senstock brought up a good point. The fire department is ill-equipped to handle a marina fire. And you're even considering putting more boats in storage above ground in enclosed buildings. That is tremendously irresponsible, and I'm sorry, to consider it unless you have considered impact, risk, some of those other aspects that are necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Sadak. Let me just clarify, at this point, we have just tabled this case. We are not considering anything. There is nothing in consideration at this point. Mr. Foster has an option to go to the ZBA if he chooses, to modify his plan if he chooses. But at this point, there is nothing under consideration. So let me just make that clear. Okay, any other comments from the floor? Mr. Bardell?
I just got one more little quick comment. Basically, under Appendix A zoning ordinance application and interpretation, just food for thought comment, Section 2.01 interpretation. In interpreting, construing, and respective provisions of this ordinance, they shall be interpreted and construed to be the minimum requirements for the provision for public health, safety, convenience, comfort, prosperity, and general welfare. Whenever any provision of this ordinance imposes more stringent requirements, restrictions, or limitations that are imposed or required by the provisions of any other ordinance, then the provisions of this ordinance shall govern. Whenever the provisions of any other ordinance impose more stringent requirements than are imposed or required by this ordinance, then the provision of such ordinance shall govern. That means you always go with the stricter ordinance, and that is for the benefit of the residents of the township. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Sedstack?
It was tabled to July 17th?
Till no later than July 17th.
No later. One thing I would ask is that if it were to be brought back under, it was brought back after it had been tabled, that the public hearing be reopened to allow residents the right and the ability to discuss any new changes that have been made that he brought forward.
I think if Mr. Foster comes with a completely new plan, then he would have to request a public hearing again, and we would be basically starting from scratch.
Right.
So it wouldn't be the existing reopened, it would be a new, would it not, Mr. Maher?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
If you as a commission determine that there's significant changes to the plan which warrant something other than what's been discussed at the previous meetings, you can certainly make a motion that the public hearing be reopened and that it be re-advertised at that point.
Okay, so reopened as opposed to opening a new one.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it technically would be a new public hearing
Okay.
because we would have to re-advertise.
Okay, that's was my concern.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Maybe by then we'll get the snowbirds back.
Maybe by then we won't have any more snow. Okay, no other comments? Our next meeting is Thursday, May 15th, 2014. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Support? Support. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.